As I said a few times up here up front, I got married last August, on August 4. My beautiful wife Kathleen is sitting there right in the second row. You can wave if you feel like, or not. While we were still dating, I remember the first time when I met her parents officially. They came to Lacombe, where she was living at the time. I was living in Edmonton, I was visiting. They came to Lacombe, they took us out to a restaurant. I think the week or maybe 2 weeks before that, I had preached a sermon at the church I was working at the time in Edmonton called Edmonton South. And while speaking to her parents sitting at our booth, at our table, we had mentioned to them that, well, I preached just recently. And so her father, now my father-in-law, asked, "Oh, what was the sermon about?" as he began eating his meal. And I explained to him, well, it was about, I don't even remember what it was about now. I explained to him what the sermon was about. And then he said, immediately after I finished explaining, "I'm not impressed." And I was just like, that is the coldest thing you could have ever said to me at this moment. And I was shocked. And so was Kathleen and her mother, and they say, "Why would you say something like that?" And he's just like, "What? What did I say?" Like, why would you tell him that right after he explains his sermon, you're just going to say you're not impressed? And he goes, "I wasn't talking about what he was talking about, I was talking about the sandwich." That cleared everything up immediately. Context is so important to understanding, isn't it? Context is so important. I'd like us all to grab our Bibles and open up to Luke chapter 19. Keep your fingers in there at Luke chapter 19. I was doing a Bible study with a non-Christian, non-Adventist person one time. And they were telling me, while we were doing the Bible study, that first of all, there was a lot of the Bible that they just didn't understand. And second of all, they told me, there was a guy I was watching on YouTube who said that Jesus believes in jihad. I'm like, when you say jihad, what do you mean? And they told me, well, Jesus believes in holy war. He believes that, well, if you're against him, his followers are supposed to go out and kill him. I'm like, whoa, no, where did you get that idea from? I said, who was this guy that was explaining this stuff? Let's go to Luke chapter 19 and start at verse 12. The parable of, I'm not sure if you pronounce it Minas or Minas, I'm going to be saying Minas today. Starting at verse 12, it says, "Therefore he said," Jesus said, "a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. So he called 10 of his servants, delivered them 10 minas, and said to them, 'Do business till I come.' But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, 'We will not have this man to reign over us.' And so it was that when he returned, having received the kingdom, he then commanded these servants to whom he had given the money to be called to him, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Then came the first, saying, 'Master, your mina has earned 10 minas.' And he said to him, 'Well done, good servant, because you were faithful in a very little, have authority over 10 cities.' And the second came, saying, 'Master, your mina has earned 5 minas.' Likewise he said to him, 'You also will be over 5 cities.' Then another came, saying, 'Master, here is your mina, which I have kept put away in a handkerchief. For I feared you, because you are an austere man. You collect what you did not deposit, and reap what you did not sow.' And he said to him, 'Out of your own mouth I will judge you, you wicked servant. You knew that I was an austere man, collecting what I did not deposit, and reaping what I did not sow. Why then did you not put my money in the bank, that at my coming I might have collected it with interest?' And he said to those who stood by, 'Take the mina from him, and give it to him who has 10 minas.' But they said to him, 'Master, he has 10 minas. For I say to you that to everyone who has will be given, and from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him.' And this is the verse that the person heard. 'But bring here those enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, and slay them before me.' And so I asked this person who I was doing the Bible study with, what verse did you hear? What verse gave you the impression, or this person off of YouTube, that Jesus believes that if you just go against him in any way, we're supposed to go out and kill that person? They said, well, the person was talking about this single verse in chapter 19, verse 27. I said, did he talk about the rest of the story? No, he just quoted that. I said, what Christian religion did he come from? He wasn't even Christian. So I said, but don't listen to him then. The man is simply just taking a verse from the Bible and just making it say what he wants. That is not the context of what this story is saying. Not at all. And so then the person asked me, then what does this story mean? Now, because I didn't have the time, because we were trying to get through a lesson, I said, I will come back to you the next time, and I'll explain this parable to you. And so, to get a good, solid answer, I turned to good old Mrs. White to get it. I've entitled my sermon, The Forgotten Prophet, because today I'd like to address an issue that is presently growing within our church, involving how our younger generation may relate to the inspired writings of Ellen G. White. I use the word forgotten not because we haven't heard her name before, not that we haven't heard of her books, and not that we haven't heard her quoted before either. I use the word forgotten because the significance of her contribution to our church and why she holds any authority within Adventism is being lost sight of. If I were to speak of messages passed down about Ellen White to our younger generations, it is very possible that it would be that she hates milk, she hates meat, and anything that has to do with fun. But of course, these things are not the truth. Was she really a prophet? What authority should we give her writings while at the same time we claim to follow the Bible and the Bible alone? Why should we even care about anything she's written? My desire today is not to specifically answer all of these questions or even to prove to you why Seventh-day Adventism as an organized religion have added her writings to our list of 28 fundamental beliefs. The purpose of my sermon today is to move you, my dear church members, to study her writings for yourself and be convinced in your own mind what you believe of Ellen White. In Joel chapter 2, verses 28 and 29, God says, "It shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. And also on my men servants and on my maidservants I will pour out my spirit in those days." The Seventh-day Adventist Church, as an organization, has come to believe that this prophecy was fulfilled within the life of Ellen G. White, who many of us have accepted as a prophet. But the problem is that only many of us have accepted her as a prophet, and not all of us. And the question is why? I'd like to present a few reasons to answer that question, only a few. Many of us just simply don't know enough about her or her writings to make a decision for or against them. Another is, truths in her writings may have collided with that sinful part of our hearts, and we'd rather just not hear the rebuke and continue on as we please. But the one that I think holds a lot of weight, that I've experienced in my own life and I've heard stories too many times, is that somebody somewhere has misused her writings, and speaking in her name has shut off any interest of those they have ended up abusing in some way, shape, or form. Was she really a prophet? I believe she was. But again, I don't want you all to just take my word for it. I want you to think for yourselves, and I know you can do that. It says in 1 John chapter 4, verse 1, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world." There are actually ways And if you have a pen and paper or a phone or something you can record this down, please do. If you can't, this sermon is going to be recorded on our website, so find it there too. But if you have your pen and paper and something to record, please write these things down. 4 things. How do you know whether a prophet is a real prophet? Number 1, they must speak according to the law and the testimony. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 8, verse 20. Isaiah chapter 8, verse 20. Write down the verse. I think I've written down the wrong verse here. Oh, I'm just in the wrong book. No, excuse me. Isaiah chapter 8, verse 20. It says, "To the law and to the testimony, if they do not speak according to this word, it is because there is no light in them." So, a true prophet, if they are a prophet, they must speak according to the law and the testimony. In other words, they must speak in accordance with Bible teachings. That's the first one. Number 2, let's go to Matthew chapter 7, verse 20. Matthew chapter 7, verse 20. Simple one. Jesus says, "Therefore, by their fruits you will know them." A true prophet will manifest the fruits of the Spirit in their lives. Ready for number 3? Say yes if you are. Good. Let us go to Jeremiah chapter 28, verse 9. Jeremiah 28, verse 9. I'll go ahead. It says, "As for the prophet who prophesies of peace, when the word of the prophet comes to pass, the prophet will be known as one whom the Lord has truly sent." So how do we know whether they're a true prophet or not? When their prediction has come to pass, we can trust that they are a true prophet. And number 4, let's go to 1 John chapter 4, verse 2. 1 John chapter 4, verse 2. It says here, "By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God." Hope you have all those things recorded. Again, if you don't, this sermon is recorded online, so you can catch all these things later. Like I said before, I don't want to get up here and try to convince you. It's not that simple to do. And I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want you to convince your own self. There was a time where I, my own self, was not convinced. And I was not convinced in a day whether Ellen White was the real deal or not. In fact, most of my life, I was very much against her. And I'll tell you why. When I was a child, around 6 or 7 years old, I grew up in the Seventh-day Adventist Church my entire life. And in the particular church I grew up in, there was a group of members who all they talked about all day long, whenever you see them, doesn't matter whether it's a weekday, doesn't matter if it's Sunday, doesn't matter if it's Sabbath, every single moment you are around them, they are talking about Ellen White. Now, I've heard of Ellen White, again, because I'm in the church growing up. I've heard of her all my life, but this group is always, constantly, everything Sister White, everything is Ellen White coming from their mouth. And this group of people some of them were kind of awkward, different. And so as a kid, I associated this awkwardness to this character who I always hear about, Ellen White. But the thing that shut me down off of it happened one particular day. It was Sabbath. If I recall correctly, it happened in my own home when people were over for lunch, if I do recall correctly. And one of the guys in particular who was always talking about Ellen White opened his mouth and said, based on something I have read from the Bible and what I've read from Sister White, I have figured out the day when Jesus is coming back. And everyone's like, why would you go and say something like that, man? What foolishness. Stop. Just stop. And I remember hearing this as a kid. No grown-ups talking to me. No one's trying to explain anything to me. I'm just hearing this thing. And not that I consciously made the decision, but the thought that I left with, just being around as a kid, playing, running around, was, Ellen White's crazy. And I went on my way and lived my life. And I grew up. By the time I got to being a teenager, I've told you before, I worked at a woodwork in high school, a woodworking furniture factory. I'd met many characters of this kind of sort by then. But there was this one guy who worked in this furniture factory who was a very, very strict, conservatives okay, strict to the point of, what's the word I'm even looking for? Oh, an oppressive nature, to an extreme side, not good. This was the kind of guy this guy was. He was very strict with everything. He was vocal if he didn't like something you were doing. And he was a strong, strict believer in Ellen White. At the end of one particular day of work, the day was done. We were shutting down all the machines, taking off our leather aprons, sweeping up sawdust. I remember I just happened to be within earshot of two girls who worked there, who also went to my high school. And they said to each other, hey, why don't we both go out for ice cream? And it just so happened that this man was also in earshot. And I just remember seeing him turn like this and look at them, his eyes down, looked angry. Walked up to them and said, did you say you're going to go eat ice cream? And they were just like, yeah. You're not supposed to drink milk. You're going to hell. And that was the end of that conversation. And I was just like, but who does that? First of all, it's not true that if you drink milk, you're going to hell. That is a lie and a falsehood. Ellen White does preach health message, but I'm not sure if you know this. She never stopped using milk products. And she even ate egg. Yes, everything in moderation. I myself am lactose intolerant, so I try not to eat too much cheese and whatever. But you're not going to hell if you do these things, nor does she condemn these things in such a way that you just can't eat it at any time of your life. That is foolishness. Don't ever tell somebody they're going to hell if they drink milk or eat cheese or something like that, eat ice cream. So another moment in my life where it's just like solidifying in my mind, this Ellen White thing, it's just crazy. It's just, I have no time for this. I was 16, 17 by this time in my life. By the time I got to university, it was pretty much solidified in my head to myself that this Ellen White thing, not for me. When I was in university, there was this one particular guy who, again, like these other characters that I met, was very strict with his life. Again, strict to an oppressive nature, not just with himself, but with others. And he'd always go around quoting Ellen White. And let me tell you something, this guy was the best, most well-versed person I have ever heard with her writings when it comes to just reciting it. This guy could quote book, chapter, paragraph, line number, just as if we were quoting the Bible, saying like Matthew chapter this, verse this. He was the best at that I'd ever seen. But the problem was he was always going around to people, telling them what he thought their sins were. No, man, you can't do this. You have to do so. I'm like, but you don't say that to that person. That's just going to make them mad. Always, all the time. But you never hear Sister White saying Steps to Christ, page 5, line 13, that you can't do that. I'm like, but don't say that to people, man. You can't say those things to people. You're just offending them. And even then, because the people aren't reading so much as you, they think, even I think, you are correct about what she's saying. There is a saying that goes, I like Jesus, just not his followers. Let us not be ignorant of this very, very important truth. Just because somebody is quoting something word for word does not mean they are an authority on the subject. Does not mean they are an authority on the subject. Nor does it mean that they're speaking within the context that it was written. Let us no longer allow ourselves to be kept from great blessings of truth because somebody has used something good as a platform to abuse and confuse us. And this does not only happen with the writings of Ellen White. It happens too with the very word of God, like we saw at the beginning. Jesus does not believe in jihad, going around killing people. That's foolishness. Jesus preached peace and love, benevolence, and all that kind of thing. I'd like to reemphasize that this sermon was not to simply convince you about the validity of Ellen White being a prophet, or that her writings have been inspired by God. The purpose was to show you the errors that may have shut you out from believing that she is who the Seventh-day Adventist Church claims she is, and help you, hopefully, to reconsider your position as to what you believe of her. It wasn't until my own experience in university that I actually had an opportunity to have a breakthrough in this sense. Remember, for years I had met a group who were kind of different. All they talk about is Ellen White. And throughout the years, you just keep meeting these different characters who just, I guess I'm not really sure of it. I'm not sure if they'd quote the Bible correctly, if they were to. But my goodness, I know they weren't quoting her right at all. When I was in university, of course, because I was studying to be a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, I had to learn about Ellen White, SDA history and the readings of Ellen White. And I remember getting to class for the first time and just thinking, why do I have to study about this? This is just... But then a thought came into my mind that I believe must have been the Holy Spirit talking to me. Because usually and my wife can tell you, I'm a very one-track minded man. I'm not just going to change that quick just because somebody's this. No, I don't care. So it had to be the Holy Spirit, and I know it. The thought came into my mind, but why do you think Ellen White's so crazy? I said, And then I thought back to that time where I was 6 or 7 years old and remembered what that guy said. I know the day Jesus is coming back. And then the other thoughts came into my mind. But what makes you think that this man holds any authority over her writings? So I don't know. I guess he might not really. And so, because I had to study it, I ended up reading her writings my own self. I had to. And reading it myself, I say, but wait, this isn't crazy. Put down Steps to Christ, next one. But all this makes sense. There is not a single thing off or awkward or weird or crazy about any of these things. It was really just that guy. Again, I can't convince you that she was a prophet. I can't convince you that she was inspired of God. All I can tell you that within my own experience, I believe it wholeheartedly. But I want you to all find that out for your own self. If you find anything crazy, anything, I want you to come to me. And if you find one thing crazy, show it to me, I'll give you a penny. If you find 100 things, I will give you $1. And if you find 1,000, I will give you 10. But if you can't find 1,000 things, you give me $10. But truthfully, I really shouldn't say anything about gambling, because Sister White says in the book Temperance on page 35, paragraph 5, Adventists are not to gamble. But the only way you'll find out if what I'm saying is true is if you look in the book and find out for yourself. Don't forget, look up these things yourself. Be convinced in your own mind what you believe of her. Thank you so much, and God bless.